All right, let's dive in. Today, we're cracking open one of the most influential, controversial, and, frankly, misunderstood books ever written, the Book of Genesis. But here's the thing, we're not going to treat this like a history lesson or some kind of scientific paper. Nope. Instead, we're going to go on a journey to explore it for what it is, one of humanity's most foundational stories about meaning, about purpose, and about our place in the universe. And to do that right, we have to start by asking a pretty radical question. So, right off the bat, let's just get this out on the table. For centuries, people have tried to cram Genesis into a modern scientific box, and it's led to just endless, exhausting debates. But what if that's the wrong approach entirely? What if we've been asking the wrong questions of this ancient text all along? Well, in this explainer, we're going to try on a totally different lens. What if we read Genesis not as science, but as theopoetry? Now, that's the central idea we're going to unpack together. Think of it like a deeply symbolic, poetic story that is way less concerned with the mechanical how of creation and way more focused on the profound why and the who. It's all about revealing meaning, not detailing mechanisms. And trust me, that one little shift in perspective, it changes everything. Okay, so to really get a grip on this theopoetry, we've got to start at the very beginning, literally, with the book's name and its absolutely brilliant structure. This is going to be the foundation for everything that comes next. You see, the title itself is our first big clue. We all know it as Genesis, right? That's the Greek word for origin or birth. But its original Hebrew title, Bereshit, is even more direct. It's just the first two words of the book, in the beginning. This is a huge signal right from the get-go that this is a story about beginnings, the beginning of the universe, of humanity, of our relationship with God, and yeah, even the beginning of our alienation from all of it. Now, the way this book is put together is just magnificent. Think of it like a giant hourglass. It starts super wide on this universal stage, telling these epic stories that concern all of humanity, the incredible beauty of creation, the tragedy of the fall, the chaos of the flood, and the towering ambition of Babel. But then the narrative funnels down. It zooms right in on the intensely personal journey of one family, starting with a guy named Abraham. This structure is just genius. It shows how a cosmic plan becomes an intimate, personal story. So let's dive into that first universal part of the story. Because to really understand what Genesis is, you first have to understand what it was pushing back against in its own time. To get how radical Genesis was, you have to picture the world it was born into. The big, dominant creation myth back then was the Babylonian Enuma Elish, which you see there on the left. It described a world born from a violent, bloody war between gods, where humanity was created as a total afterthought, basically as slaves to do the gods' dirty work. Now look at the vision from Genesis on the right. It's a completely different universe. Here, a single good God creates the world through a deliberate spoken word. And humanity? We aren't slaves. We are the pinnacle of this creation. The imago Dei, the very image of God, given dignity and real responsibility. I mean, the difference is just night and day. It's staggering. Theologian N.T. Wright takes this idea even further. He frames the whole creation account as the construction of a cosmic temple. When you see it this way, the 7-day structure isn't about a literal week. It's a literary framework that mirrors ancient rituals for dedicating a temple. And in this grand cosmic temple, humanity isn't a servant at all. We are placed inside it as priests, tasked with caring for and cultivating creation on God's behalf. You see, it's a story about our job, our vocation, not about physics. But then the story pivots hard, from order to chaos. The fall is introduced, symbolized by the serpent. And the serpent isn't just a talking snake, you know? It's the personification of that tempting internal voice, that little voice of radical, unchecked autonomy that whispers the oldest lie in the book. You don't need a creator. You can decide what's good and evil all on your own. You can be your own God. The psychological shift this causes is captured in one incredibly powerful symbol: nudity. Before the fall, Adam and Eve are naked and they feel no shame. This represents a state of total transparency, of innocence, of fully integrated consciousness. There's no gap between who they are and how they appear to each other. But after they eat the fruit, they're suddenly aware of their nakedness and they feel shame. This symbolizes the birth of a fragmented consciousness, a split between our inner self and the outer world, which leads to hiding, to fear, to alienation. And this brings us to a really crucial reframing of what sin means in this context. As Paulo Borges Jr. puts it so well, the story isn't just about breaking some arbitrary rule, it's about a much deeper rupture. Sin here isn't just about action, it's a fundamental shift in belief. It's a declaration of independence from the divine. It's the idea that we can create our own meaning entirely on our own terms. So this theme of humanity trying to take God's place then scales up, from the individual to the entire collective in the story of the Towers of Babel. Here you have an entire civilization uniting with one single goal: build a tower that reaches the heavens and, as the text says, make a name for itself. This is the ultimate act of civilizational narcissism, a unified project of pure self-glorification. And the consequence here is fascinating, because on the surface, God confusing their language looks like a punishment, right? But if you look closer, it's actually presented as a kind of cure. When all of humanity unites under a single narcissistic goal, the result is a kind of totalitarianism. So the divine response is to shatter that dangerous uniformity by introducing diversity. The collapse of the shared language forces humanity to spread out, to develop unique cultures, preventing the ego of the collective from just consuming everything. And this is that moment. This is where the hourglass pinches tight. After all these grand, universal stories of failure, God's strategy shifts. The narrative zooms in, from the wide shot of all humanity to a close-up on one man and his family. The solution to the universal problem, it turns out, is going to begin with a personal relationship. This quote from N.T. Wright just nails the connection between the two halves of the book. It's so powerful. At Babel, humanity tried to seize greatness for itself, and in response, God starts a covenant with Abraham, promising to give him a great name. It's a complete reversal. The antidote to human pride isn't divine punishment, it's divine grace and a promise, all started through a personal call. So the rest of Genesis just follows this one family, and each of the main guys becomes an archetype, a model for a different part of the faith journey. It all starts with Abraham, who represents the faith that walks. He's called to leave everything he knows, his country, his family, and just journey into the unknown based only on a promise. His entire life is a testament to trust over sight. Then comes his son, Isaac, who embodies a quieter, inherited faith. He doesn't have some dramatic call story. His challenge is to carry the weight of a legacy, to live in the shadow of a giant. Then we get Jacob, whose name literally means deceiver. He embodies the faith that struggles. He spends his life scheming and running. Until one incredible night, he literally wrestles with God and refuses to let go until he's blessed. He walks away with a limp, a new name, and a totally transformed identity. And finally, there's Joseph, the dreamer sold into slavery by his own brothers. He represents the faith that endures, the faith that finds redemptive purpose even in the middle of unbelievable betrayal and trauma. Let's just hang out with Jacob for a second, because his story is so incredibly rich from a psychological standpoint. He spends his life running and deceiving, and then that one night, he wrestles with a divine being until daybreak. He leaves with a limp and a new name, Israel, which means he who struggles with God. This is such a profound symbol for the spiritual journey, isn't it? It suggests we can't get our true blessing, our new identity, until we're willing to really confront the divine, to grapple with our own shadow, and to be wounded and transformed by that very process. And then, of course, there's Joseph, whose story is the grand finale of Genesis. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, his life is just a series of descents into darkness. And yet, as this quote so beautifully puts it, every single pit stop becomes part of a larger plan. The prison cell becomes the unlikely space where God is actually preparing him to save nations. It's a masterclass in the idea of providence, that even in our deepest suffering, a redemptive story is somehow being written. So as we pull the camera back now and look at the book as a whole, a really clear and timeless pattern starts to emerge. And this isn't just some ancient story, it's a reflection of our own. The entire narrative of Genesis really follows this three-act structure. It begins with order, a good, harmonious creation that is just filled with purpose. This is followed by chaos. Humanity chooses self-reliance over trust, which leads to alienation, shame, and fragmentation. But, and this is key, it doesn't end there. The final act is redemption. God doesn't give up on creation, but enters into it personally, starting a covenant to begin the long, slow work of restoration. This is a fundamental pattern of the human condition, played out over and over. Okay, so why does any of this ancient poetry matter to us right now? Well, because these patterns are our patterns. The creation story challenges us to find a purpose that's deeper than just being productive in a world of endless noise. The fall is a daily reality, that subtle temptation to make ourselves the absolute center of our own universe. And Babel, It's the perfect diagnosis for our online culture, isn't it? That constant anxious pressure to build a brand and make a name for ourselves one post at a time. Abraham's journey is a call to trust when our own life's GPS goes offline. And Joseph's story offers this profound hope that our deepest stepbacks, our lowest pits, can somehow become the very seeds of our future. And this is really the ultimate hope of the whole book. The grand biblical narrative starts in a garden in Genesis, and it ends in a restored garden city in the book of Revelation. The journey is a return home, but to a home made new. Despite humanity's constant failures, the most persistent, stubborn theme in Genesis is the promise of a new beginning. Maybe the best way to summarize the entire book of Genesis is with this simple, beautiful line from Andrew White. He calls it, "The story of a God who never gets tired of starting over." With Adam, with Noah, with Abraham, with Jacob, again and again and again, a fresh start is offered. It's a story of relentless, creative grace in the face of human screw-ups. So, we'll leave you with this question. If Genesis is a book about beginnings, written deep into the fabric of human experience, then it invites us to look at our own lives, at our own moments of chaos, our own struggles, our own prisons. And it asks, what new beginning is waiting to be born in your story? Thanks for joining this exploration.